Welcome to the month of July. Well, July is all about Elizabeth I here on the Tudor Travel Show, and we have got two fascinating interviews for you to listen to. The first of those is an interview I did on site at Kenilworth Castle. In fact, it wasn't really an interview, it was more a tour. So I am in conversation with the volunteer coordinator, Gus Nasser, at Kenilworth Castle, and he takes me on a tour of the castle, particularly thinking about the context of Elizabeth I's historic visit to Kenilworth in 1575. So we explore and recreate the castle as it was at its zenith and imagine Elizabeth arriving there, and just what lengths did Robert Dudley go to in order to please his mistress and his queen? Well, you'll find out all about that very shortly. We also, of course, have our Tudor Travel Guides news desk, where we will be going back to the succession crisis in July 1553, where there are some pretty dramatic events unfolding, I can tell you. And then to round up our conversation today, I'm in discussion with Professor Susan Doran from the University of Oxford. She is a specialist in early modern English history, and in particular has a research interest which encompasses Elizabeth and her court. And I wanted to talk to Sue about an artefact that just has long fascinated me, and that is, wait till the end of the podcast and you'll hear all about it then. So without further ado, I think we should get straight on in and let's go time travelling over to Kenilworth Castle, where I caught up with Gus Nasser, as I say, the volunteer coordinator there at Kenilworth, to hear all about this incredible historic building. So hi Gus, I'm here at Kenilworth Castle with you today, the magnificent Kenilworth Castle, on what is a beautiful sunny May Day morning, isn't it?
It is indeed. It's lovely, and lovely to have you here as well, Sarah.
Oh, thank you very much. So before we start talking about our subject of today, which is of course Queen Elizabeth,
yes,
and Robert Dudley, perhaps you could introduce yourself. Who are you, Gus? What do you do here at Kenilworth?
All right, so my name is Gus. I'm currently the volunteer coordinator for Kenilworth Castle with English Heritage, and I'm mainly in charge of developing the whole volunteering scene at Kenilworth Castle, and hopefully we'll build that into the future. I'm extremely passionate about Kenilworth Castle. I do believe when our visitors come to visit, they have this positive energy that comes from this beautiful, amazing castle. And I think it's because it was built upon a love story.
Oh, well, that's a wonderful way to start our story today, because as I mentioned, we are here really to talk about Elizabeth and her visits to Kenilworth. Yes. And she came to Kenilworth on more than one occasion, didn't she?
Yes, so she gave the castle back to Robert Dudley in the 1560s. And he started a whole range of renovation, building new buildings, in order, anticipating her visit in 1575. And through these different visits, so she visited 4 times. First time was in the 1560s. She actually stayed with his brother Ambrose in Warwick Castle, because she gave Ambrose Warwick Castle, and she gave Robert Dudley at a certain point Kenilworth Castle. And she went and stayed in Warwick, and then came here on the horses as part of her visits, and just checked on the building work that Robert Dudley did. And every time she arrived, she had to sort of say, well, I don't appreciate that, I appreciate this. And Robert Dudley had to really work around what the Queen's needs and yeah, mainly needs.
So he was absolutely at her utter command.
Oh my gosh, he was. He was. We think for the 1575 visit, he actually spent more than £20 million in today's money.
Is that right?
On that one visit.
Oh wow, that's incredible. That is love and devotion and service.
It
for
is,
you.
Sarah. And I think it's mainly because he was planning at a certain point to indirectly maybe ask her hand in marriage. And he thought the 1575 visit would have been the ultimate sort of the height of their relationship maybe, or their friendship. And he, during these days that she visited in 1575, he would have been able to maybe convince her that he's the right person for her to marry.
So Elizabeth came here for that, you mentioned, the great visit of 1575. And
Yes.
she was here for nearly 3 weeks, wasn't she?
Yeah, so she arrived on the 9th of July. It was a Saturday, 1575. She arrived in the afternoon. And she left on the 27th of July.
Okay.
So during which she stayed all of her days in Kenilworth Castle.
In Castle.
But before that, so in 1575, in 1572, for example, she came. Robert Dudley already built that building on the left side, Leicester's building.
So what we're looking at here now is we're actually by the outer gatehouse, aren't we, at the moment? And we're looking towards the main palace buildings,
Yes,
and
so
a tower known as Leicester's Tower.
Yeah, so we've arrived from what we call today Mortimer's Gate, and that was one of the gates, one of the main gates for Queen Elizabeth to have arrived probably in the late afternoon, 1575. And that's in the south part of the castle, and then we're going now towards the north. And as we step into Mortimer's Gate on the left side, there's an amazing, beautiful building that we, English Heritage, has 8 years ago installed platforms in, so that visitors can actually go up the steps and go to see where Queen Elizabeth actually stayed.
And we're going to be doing that, aren't we?
Yes,
shortly.
we are, yes.
But I notice, and I know that if we just walk over here, over to our left, there's a little bit of a wall missing at the moment. But what we do get, because the wall is missing, is a view out over the meadows. Beautiful meadows, the cows are grazing. But it wasn't always meadows, was it?
No, it was the Great Mere. So it was a beautiful, beautiful lake that surrounded the castle throughout, and that was part of the beautification of the castle. I mean, in the 1100s, Kenilworth was a fortress. So it started as a fortress, a defensive place. It was really humble. Just the keep that you see in front of us here, that actually Robert Dudley has included in his big plans for the visit.
So that's known as the Norman Keep, isn't it? And
Correct.
It's the largest sort of square tower, very reflective of the period.
Yes, so that was Kenilworth Castle, and then it had some walls around it, but then beyond that, and it had a bit of a lake around it as part of the defensive system. So Robert Dudley has used that and made this beautiful lake into a beautiful area where, when she goes on and she looks outside her bedroom at night or in the morning, she can see this water, beautiful water surrounding the castle, and looking into the amazing forests and the woods that's currently still around in Kenilworth, because
Yes.
Kenilworth is a beautiful town.
Yes, I mean, obviously there is a larger town here now, but still, as we look out now, you can see fields and trees as far as the eye can see.
Indeed.
So you still do get a sense,
Indeed,
don't you,
yes.
of what Elizabeth saw.
Yes, you do.
So we're going to walk forward now, and we're going into what I suppose is the outer bailey. It was the sort of the more public area of the castle, where maybe some of the service offices were.
Yeah, so as you went into the castle in that period of time, probably on the right side we would have had a bakery, maybe different workshops that help support the castle itself. We have also, as you look now on the right side, the beautiful stables that were built by Robert Dudley's father, John Dudley. And they're just simply amazing. And you can see that architectural style, the Tudor architectural style of stables. We also have, so right in front of us, we can see the beautiful, amazing gatehouse, what we call the gatehouse. It's the north side of the castle. And then if you look totally to your left side, you can see in front of us the Great Hall.
Yes.
But in those days, Sarah, we had an amazing, beautiful, great wall that connected the keep to Leicester's building.
Yes, so we're sort of looking up a grassy bank now because the whole site rises gently, doesn't it?
Yes.
And as you explain, there's the Leicester's Tower on the left, the original Norman Tower on the right, and then there was a connecting wall. So that really separated off this outer ward or bailey from the inner ward.
Exactly. So that was where probably when Queen Elizabeth arrived, she would have gone through the main gate that's over there. So she went to the... Yes,
so
please.
Why don't
we
we walk in the footsteps of Elizabeth I? Now, I noticed that in this grassy bank, there's what looks to be footings of a bridge. Obviously, there must have been some paved sort of pathway that took you up to the main entrance gate.
Exactly. Well, yes, that is the case. So you can see over here part of the little bridge that carried the pathway to go all the way to that inner court. And once you take a left, you go into Leicester's building.
I have to say, we're literally walking up the very same, well, it's grass now, isn't it? But the very same trackway that Elizabeth and Robert Dudley and the whole entourage.
Yes.
I've got shivers going up my spine.
Sarah, you can't believe, every time I come, I work here, and every time I come here, either to open open up in the morning or late at night for closure, it's just amazing that I'm truly, truly, truly blessed and honoured to be in such amazing castle. So I want just to show you here on the floor.
Yes.
So this is the original flooring, and you can see some dents over here.
Yes,
And
that's right. The stone is worn away, just like sometimes stone is worn with footsteps, but this time it's been worn with the wheels of carts, literally coming up. So we are now standing, I suppose, under what used to be the gatehouse into the inner ward of the castle.
So yes, it was a gate going into the inner part of the castle, which was more private. So not many people had access to this part.
Yes, right. And of course you're struck immediately by, and I'm no doubt in Elizabeth's time, when it was still complete, the beauty of the Great Hall, which still in its ruinous state.
It is amazing.
You're looking at the entrance porch there with this really elaborately carved stone archway leading into the Great Hall and these great big sort of tall traceried windows, aren't we? And they're just really pretty. Yeah. Shall we go forward and just have a look in there? We've got the kitchens, haven't we, over to our right here as we walk forward, because we've just now got the Great Hall kind of towering up in front of us and what remains of it. And so I gather there was a flight of stairs that took you up to the first floor level.
Exactly, and that's, you can see as you go into the main hall area, you can see the beautiful decorations around the entrance, and that would have been a grand entrance.
It's really stunning, even though because is it sandstone?
Sandstone.
It's quite worn, isn't it, by the weather? But even so, you can really get a sense of just how beautifully carved it was.
Yeah, sandstone is just fascinating. The sandstone, was actually we got it from around the area.
Okay.
So it's within in the grounds of Kenilworth. We had the same sandstone, so he was able to build as much as he wanted and renovate as much. So now we're going into the Great Hall.
And I've got this big smile on my face, so I'm thinking, wow, I'm just looking up at these fabulous windows. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 4 windows on one side, and I guess 3 on the other, 3 or 4 on the other. So we've got
3 that are standing.
3 that are standing, and then 2 fireplaces. So we're in the basement, aren't we? So this would have been a cellar, but above us
would have been the floor, the main floor, where they probably dined and danced.
And with all that talk of dining and dancing, let's take a little musical break for a moment and listen to a piece composed by the English Renaissance composer Thomas Morley. It is a sacred pavan, the pavan, of course, being a very stately court dance. And so perhaps we can transport ourselves in time into the Great Hall at Kenilworth, where we see the feasting and the drinking and the talking and the dancing to this fine music. with that, it's time for us to return to Kenilworth Castle as Gus and I take a stroll over to explore Leicester's Tower.
Well, we've talked a lot about Leicester's Tower, so I think we should maybe
Yes,
go
I
over
think-
and have a look at it. The pièce de résistance
Yes.
of Kenilworth Castle and Elizabeth's time here.
I think it's really, yeah, it is really magical to be able to actually go into the chambers where Queen Elizabeth would have been. And I think, you know, that's a great honour for me to be able to take those steps. So we've actually installed platforms 8-9 years ago in order for visitors to come up and see the Leicester's building. Whereas before it was just ruins and you weren't able to actually go in.
I do remember both scenarios,
Oh, yeah.
and I came up. I came here for the first time when you had the platform just about a year or so ago, and it really transforms the visit because you do feel like you're so much closer to Elizabeth when you're in her private rooms.
Yes. Let me just open the gate. So just if we
Yes,
stand outside
please.
Elizabeth.
Yes. So what do we have here in front of us? We're still on this is the ground floor.
Yeah, so this is the ground floor, and this wouldn't have been where Queen Elizabeth came in. So her main entrance was over there. So that
I see.
door. So she would have gone through there and not where we're going in now.
At first floor level, so there would have been a
Exactly.
first floor access.
Exactly. So there would have been steps that's taken you into the building itself. So there was an outer gate. Then you can see here, if you can look closely, there's this part that we had a fireplace. And also the other side we had another fireplace. And in between there's amazing entrance to the chambers. So she wouldn't have gone through the basement. She would have just gone straight into her
Yes.
chamber. So embrace yourself, Sarah.
I
After you.
will. I'm looking forward to the adventure. Are we going up first?
Yes, we're going up.
It's quite a feat, isn't it? The staircase that you've built here. It's a
Yeah, it had to be a proper staircase.
proper, sturdy staircase. Wow, so we're entering through this sort of typical Tudor arched doorway into this grand chamber, and the sun is streaming, isn't it? Literally
It
streaming through the
is
gap.
amazing.
In what was once the window, we've now just got the empty space, but you can see how this room would have been just flooded with light in the morning.
Oh, yes, yes. Light and beautiful. You can see some parts of the plaster.
Oh, yes.
You can see all of these dots or holes in the wall, and that's to hold plaster and to have beautiful decorations. In addition to that, of course, we should always remember that in these beautiful castles and buildings also we had tapestries. So you had the merge of tapestries, the artwork that you had on the plaster, that also kept it warm.
And we're at which room, which chamber are we in now? Because we are now actually in Elizabeth's apartments, aren't we?
Yes, yes, we are. So she would have come up here through these doors and came into the outer chambers. And that's where Queen Elizabeth would have met her ministers, any guests that are visiting. She didn't want to really go and meet them elsewhere. That's where she would. So it's like a throne room in a way, but it's just outside her private chambers.
Yes.
So that would have, and you can see here in the reconstruction that we have on this panel, it shows you how beautiful you had different plants and stuff that
On the walls.
on the walls, everywhere on the walls.
Yeah, so we've got a picture, haven't we, of Elizabeth just standing in front of her throne, and there are two gentlemen kneeling,
Exactly.
obviously presenting themselves to the Queen, and that's exactly the kind of thing that would have happened in this very room. Wow. But now we're going into her hallowed chambers,
So this is, and you can see the beautiful entrance here.
this carved
sand-
sandstone doorway with this lovely Tudor arch that leads us through into another. It's
So
a ruined
this
chamber.
is the chamber. So this is the private chamber. So you can't imagine there was the floor continued to the other side, and there was a wall and a door in between, and that would have been an outer chamber where some of her close friends would stay, and this side would have been where Queen Elizabeth actually stayed. So this would have been her chamber, but then it went to the private staircase. So now I think all of the steps are sort of collapsed. It's not, people don't have access to it, but you can see clearly there's this tower, and this tower leads straight to her bedroom.
It's such a tiny little door. It's so easy to imagine her going through it. She can't have been any taller than that, that's for sure. But it's so easy to imagine her just walking in and out of that. It really quite takes your breath away.
Indeed, it's amazing. You can see these windows that overlook the outside area of the castle, but at the same time the apartments and then the Great Hall. So we'll go up this way and take us to upstairs. And what's beautiful about this building is that when we do have, like, if we have a big event, for example, and we have many people on the grounds checking out the different things that we have, the performers that we have, you can come on your own here and feel this calmness and quietness and just be
it's very
like
serene.
One with the building, yes.
It's very serene. Everywhere you go, whether you're looking over the buildings or you're looking over the countryside, the views are just astonishing.
So this would have been one side of it, and you had another chamber in this area. You can still see where the doors were, a fireplace went, other doors that connected to the other room.
I was going to say, there's lots of connecting doors,
Yes.
isn't there? You can see how it all...
Because the other room, the dance floor. And again, it is connected to the floors below us through the private staircase.
doorway.
So if she wanted to come up on a day on her own, or Robert Dudley sneaks in, you know, and they come
privately, and they don't want
dance.
anybody else to see
Exactly.
them. So we're now in...
Look at this. This is the this is the view
I'm just
that you
going
get from the dance floor. So this is where they had the dancing. So they danced in this area. It still had big windows. It still had this, you know, looking at, you know, outside at the same time as you're dancing. And
So we're directly above Elizabeth's private chambers, aren't
Yes.
we? So we've just been on the first floor. Now we're up on the second floor.
yes.
In this suite of rooms, and as you say, this particular room was for dancing and music and pleasure.
Exactly. And I think, you know, music is the mirror to the soul, and in those days, you know, it was just part of your entertainment, and that's what she did. So sometimes she might have been dancing alone with Robert Dudley, or she had different people that are, you know, her inner circle, and they would have come here and then just danced.
Can you tell us of some of the events? Because there were amazing pageantry and fireworks, weren't there? And
So fireworks was part of that, and I think twice or three times in the main schedule, the program that George Gascoigne has put for the Queen, created for the Queen, is the fireworks. And, you know, Robert Dudley is said to have gone all the way to Italy to get a specific type of fireworks
is that so?
in order to come and do it here. So it is said that in the mere, so in the water, you had islands that were moving.
Really?
Moving islands. So a technique that I think he brought from France. And so we had moving islands. So probably the Queen would have sat on one of the areas that overlooked the mere, and she would have witnessed all these different activities and plays in the water. In the mere.
I see. So she wasn't actually on the water on a boat. She probably observed it
yes, from the
How
side.
wonderful. I don't suppose those cows down there grazing very idly now have any sense of the incredible history that unfolded around them.
But I sincerely, you know, I urge anyone that visits Kenilworth Castle, and I challenge them a little bit, that you come here and you find this amazing energy about the place. And I think it is to do with how, you know, this whole castle was built based on love,
Yes.
on Robert Dudley's
Adoration, really.
Adoration of the Queen, yes.
I mean, genuine as well. I
It
mean, I
is.
know he wanted to propose to her, but they were, as you say, lifelong friends and had
Yeah.
experienced the Tower together, and that must have forged a connection between them,
And
which
not-
seemed to be unbreakable.
Yeah, not just that. I mean, it is said that Queen Elizabeth bluntly asked him to marry Mary, Queen of Scots, at a certain point, and he said yes. Although I personally think he loved her, but he said yes because he thought, I'll do anything for Queen Elizabeth. And that was part of his affection towards her. And, you know, it is said on her dying bed, we found a letter next to her bed that was Robert Dudley's last letter to the Queen before he died. And in it, he's very affectionate. He says, I kiss your feet, I leave you these pearls, I leave you this and that. And on it is handwriting by the Queen saying it's his last letter. And that was found on her dying bed. And you know, that really shows that there was a connection.
To me, also, that's the definitive proof for me that she really loved him. You do not write his last letter without that his being somebody that really, really meant something to you and that you loved deeply.
And I think in those days also she called him my eyes, I think, and Robin, I think, you know, these are different things that she called, and her favourite at a certain point. So I just wanted to show and just draw your attention. Now we're looking across towards the town, towards Kenilworth, and you can't actually see the town because there's all these trees and there's a lot of greenery. But in between those trees, you can see like a bit of a lake over there.
Yes.
Water.
Yes.
And it is said that Robert Dudley has built that lake specifically so that when Queen Elizabeth looks outside the window when the moon is out, she can see the reflection of the moon on that lake. So he went to that sort of...
My heart is just all of a flutter. I mean, how romantic can you get? But you mentioned gardens as well, and of course the Elizabethans love their gardens, so maybe we should take a stroll over there and have a look at them.
Yes, of course.
And that's where we're going to leave our visit to Kenilworth Castle today. But fear not, we're going to return next month when Gus and I do indeed take a stroll over to the Elizabethan garden. It's a wonderful recreation of Elizabeth's privy garden at Kenilworth and is well worth taking a look at. So I hope you enjoyed that tour of Kenilworth, particularly focusing in on Elizabeth's visit of 1575 and just how much Robert Dudley did for Elizabeth in creating the castle and a sumptuous suite of rooms in honour of his mistress. And if you'd like to find out more about Kenilworth Castle, do remember that you can check out the English Heritage website and search for Kenilworth Castle. You'll find all the relevant visitor information, including information on the special events which are held throughout the year, particularly during the summer and on bank holiday. And don't forget, if you want to pick up your own tailored Tudor travel guide that gives you all the insider information on Kenilworth Castle, you can head over to the Tudor Travel Guide shop and pick up your Tudor Day Out in Kenilworth, or now, of course, the guides are available for Kindle via Amazon, both on the US and the UK site. Now it's time to take a quick break and enjoy a little bit more music by this time a composer called Thomas Campion, and this is the Queen's Almain. And now it's time for a complete change of tempo. And we're going to head over to the TTG news desk. July is a busy month in the Tudor calendar, with a certain succession crisis raging through the south of England. So let's go right over right now to Robert Cole and hear exactly what has been breaking.
Welcome to the July o'clock news with your newscaster, Robert Cole. Here are the Tudor headlines for the month of July. King Edward VI dies at Greenwich Palace. Lady Jane Grey declared Queen. Sir Thomas More is executed on Tower Hill. And King Henry VIII marries for the 6th time in a private ceremony at Hampton Court Palace. Good day. And in our top story today, King Edward VI is dead. This afternoon a proclamation was issued by the Royal Council, headed by the Duke of Northumberland, confirming that the long illness that had afflicted the 15-year-old king had taken its toll and that King Edward had finally passed away at Greenwich Palace at around 6 p.m. on the 6th of July. The cause of the king's demise, however, remains unclear. Although many say it was of natural means, there are those who suspect foul play and that the king was poisoned. Either way, it's believed that his body will be laid to rest in Westminster Abbey in the coming weeks, once appropriate funeral preparations have been put in place. Meanwhile, while the court was thrown into mourning, the Royal Council declared that the late king had nominated Lady Jane Grey, his first cousin once removed, as his rightful heir. Lady Jane is the granddaughter of the late Mary Tudor, Queen of France, and her second husband, Charles Brandon. She married Northumberland's own son, Lord Guildford Dudley, in a lavish ceremony at Durham House on the Strand earlier this year. Since the declaration of the Royal Council, the 16-year-old and her husband have been conveyed to the Tower as royal protocol dictates. However, there are already rumours that Princess Mary, eldest daughter of King Henry VIII, has already declared herself Queen and is heading towards her estates in East Anglia, where she hopes to raise a force to assist her in asserting what she sees as her rightful claim to the throne. We can hear more about the dramatic developments which are unfolding from our roving reporter, Kate Lodger, who joins us now from the grounds of Sawston Hall in Cambridge. So, Kate, why are you at Sawston Hall? Can you update us on the latest?
Yes, indeed, Robert. It's been quite a dramatic couple of days here at Sawston Hall, I can tell you. The local villagers report seeing Princess Mary here in the early evening of the 7th of July when she rode through the village on horseback and at some speed, witnesses report. She was seen to be accompanied by a couple of her ladies and a group of 6 gentlemen, one of whom was recognised as Andrew Huddleston, and he's a kinsman of John Huddleston, the owner of Sawston Hall. Rumour abounds that the princess had been heading into London in answer to a summons to see her dying brother when she was stopped and told that the king was indeed already dead and that the summons was a plot by Northumberland to seize her and lock her up in the Tower. As a consequence, I can tell you that Mary turned about and fled northwards, and she came to rest here on Friday night at the invitation of Master Huddleston. However, her rest was short-lived when she was warned that the young Robert Dudley, one of Northumberland's sons, was headed this way from nearby Cambridge in an attempt to capture her. It is believed that she escaped, however, in the nick of time by dressing as a dairymaid and riding pillion behind a manservant and escorted, I believe, by her dashing host. And when Dudley's troops arrived here, they were apparently so furious that she had slipped through their fingers that they set the house ablaze, destroying much, unfortunately, of the medieval fabric of this building. And although you can't see it, Robert, I am standing here on the lawn in front of the smouldering ruins of Sawston Hall. It
maybe nearly 2 days on from the blaze, but the wreckage, I can tell you, is still giving off some heat, and it's fair to say that many of the family's prized possessions have been lost.
Oh, wow. So do we know where Princess Mary is now?
Well, we don't have anything definite. Reports seem to indicate that she was heading towards her house at Kenning Hall in Norfolk, and I believe that's where she expects to raise an army and possibly even march on London. As you say, Master Robert, there are reports coming in that yesterday the princess in fact declared herself as queen, and as we all know, she has long had the support of the people, and it's by no means a foregone conclusion that the new regime will survive.
Well, thank you for that, Kate. There's some turbulent times, it seems to me, ahead. Well, that was Kate Lodger reporting from outside what remains of Sawston Hall in Cambridgeshire. And that concludes the July o'clock news. All that remains is for me to say that the TTG News Desk will return again in August. But for now, it's back to the 21st century.
Wow, that's some drama going on there at Sawston Hall. But now we have a chance to catch our breath and talk about something far more serene and beautiful. I recently was in discussion with Professor Sue Doran, and Sue is Professor of Early Modern History at Jesus College and St Benet's Hall, Oxford. And I wanted to talk to Sue about an artefact which has long fascinated me. And this is a ring that once belonged to Elizabeth I. And as you will hear, it's called the Chequers Ring for very good reason. So let's go straight over and get right into my discussion with Sue and find out all about this beautiful object and the controversy and speculation which has long surrounded it. So hello, Sue. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's nice to speak to you.
Well, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here talking about an artefact that really intrigues me and has intrigued me for a long time. And that, of course, is the Chequers Ring, which once belonged to Elizabeth I. And I tell you why it's intrigued me, but I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, it is just so beautiful. And then I think, obviously, secondly, it's not just about what the ring looks like on the outside. It's those two portraits on the inside and the portrait of the mysterious woman. Who is she? And I can't wait to talk to you about your thoughts about that. And then I think the final thing is it's relatively inaccessible, isn't it? Because it's at Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's home here in the UK. So essentially it's in a private collection. And I noticed that you had actually been co-curator, I think, of an exhibition back in, was it 2002, 2003, when the ring was out of Chequers?
Right. Yes, it's very fragile, so they have to be extremely careful about loans and about people wanting to see it, even for scholarly purposes.
Oh, wonderful. So when did you first see the ring? Was it then? Was it for that exhibition?
It was for the exhibition, yes.
Oh,
that was my first encounter with the ring. And of course, I've done some reading about it since and for the exhibition as well.
Mm. So perhaps we could just start by describing the ring. Can you? I will also, by the way, just to say, folks who are listening, I will do an accompanying blog article and put some pictures up so that you are able to see the pictures as we are talking. But nevertheless, it would be great if you could perhaps just describe the ring for us.
Yes, well, I think the first thing to note is that it's made of mother of pearl. It's not just a solid gold or a silver ring. So the inside of the ring, underneath the gold outlay, is made of mother of pearl. It's an extremely precious item because the ring, the hoop of the ring, has table cut diamonds and rubies all round it. So it has a very rich colour. At what's called the basal, the wider and thicker end of the ring, it contains a flat surface and bears the monogram of ER. Elizabeth Rex, of course. And the E is made out of the diamond that I mentioned. And the blue is blue enamel, which you can see just underneath. So it's on the outside of the ring. It does look exquisite. It does look precious. It looks like the ring for a queen. But then, as you say, it becomes more interesting because there's a hinge that opens up the bezel, and what you can see inside are two tiny miniatures. And we'll talk about, who the portraits are of. But there are two portraits. One is unquestionably Elizabeth. It's a profile portrait. It looks like a cameo. Elizabeth had a number of cameos made with her portrait. And it is a portrait which shows her sort of her head and a bit of her bust with a brooch on her chest. And she is looking as she would have done in the mid-1570s. So people think that the ring is around 1575. The other portrait is of someone from a much earlier period, probably around the period maybe 1535, mid-1530s, because of the clothing that the woman in the other portrait is wearing. She has on her head what's called a French hood, and the costume is the sort of things that noble women would wear in the mid-1530s, possibly going on to the 1540s. So that's really what the ring looks like on the outside. But intriguingly, inside of the ring, there is just behind the bezel, there is a phoenix in fire. The phoenix is a mythical bird. It is a bird that is associated with resurrection, because the myth goes that there is only one phoenix at a time, and that the phoenix dies in flames, and at the point of death, a new one is regenerated. And the phoenix was a symbol that was associated with Elizabeth and with other people as well. Philip Sidney, for example, was called a phoenix. And the reason for him being called a phoenix was that he was seen as unique in terms of his poetry.
See. Well, can I pick up on 2 or 3 points there that are intriguing me? First of all, if we go back to the beginning of what you were saying, I did actually, for a long time, just assume that the ring was solid gold, and it was only actually quite recently I noticed that. And I didn't know it was mother of pearl, but I noticed it was a different material. That's right. That's quite unusual, isn't it? And why do you think that was used rather than gold? Are there any theories on that?
No, there's no theories as far as I know, but I would guess 2 points. Number one is that pearls are associated with Elizabeth. They're seen often to be a symbol of virginity, and it may be that it was chosen for that reason. It's also quite clear this ring was not going to be worn. So using many different materials would make it even more precious. So there's gold there, but instead of it just being totally made of gold, they bring in another precious material.
That's interesting. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm sort of fast forwarding maybe a little bit on in the history of the ring's life, but can you tell me, is it true or false? I read somewhere that this was the ring that was taken off Elizabeth's finger at her deathbed and sent to the new Scottish/English king. Now, is that a complete myth, one of those things that have been, just passed around, or was that the case?
Well, it's certainly not this ring. There is a myth, and it may be true, it may not be, and it's repeated in a whole range of media, drama, opera, that a ring was taken off Elizabeth's finger and given to James, but it was a sapphire ring, the way that it's described. So it can't possibly be this ring, if indeed it was a true story. Okay,
well, we can put to bed that rumour. I love it when you can do that with such definitive certainty. That's wonderful. But moving on, we talked about the fact that probably one of the most intriguing aspects of this ring are these two portraits, and particularly the second portrait, and who is that woman? And of course, most people would say, well, that must be Anne Boleyn. It was obviously a very private kind of reference to how Elizabeth might have felt about her mother, which she obviously didn't speak about in public, I think only once maybe in her lifetime that we know about. But I've also heard that it could have been Catherine Parr. So what are your thoughts on that? What do people believe?
The third suggestion is that actually it's a portrait of Elizabeth herself when she was young. Maybe the portrait isn't of someone in the 1530s, but maybe the 1540s, and they draw attention to perhaps a likeness with the one portrait of Elizabeth that we have when she is around the age of 13, 14. And there is a similarity. So that's another possibility. I think the likelihood of it being Catherine Parr is very slight. There's no reason why she should be associated so closely with Elizabeth in this very rich gift. I would think that it's most likely to be Anne Boleyn. And I follow Eric Ives, who's written on Anne Boleyn in this. He draws attention to the fact that the pictures that we have of Anne Boleyn, the portraits, are much later in date. So there's no point really making a comparison between the likeness here and the likenesses in the well-known portraits of Anne Boleyn, where she has an AB attached to a pendant. Where he sees a similarity is in the known contemporary representation of Anne Boleyn, which is a medal. It's a medal that was produced in 1534, and there you can see that she has a long and oval face, just as the figure in the miniature has here. The other point that he makes, and I think this is a very good one of the reasons why others have said, look, can't possibly be Anne Boleyn because she had black hair. And the woman here, we're not quite sure of what colour hair it is because it's faded, but it's certainly not black. And the point that Eric Ives makes is that there's only one known description of Anne Boleyn as having black hair, and that's written by Nicholas Sander, a Catholic who wanted to demonstrate that Anne Boleyn was really a witch. And of course, black hair and witches, they go together like a bread and cheese. So what we have here is probably a misrepresentation of the colour of Anne Boleyn's hair, and most usually it's described by the Italians as marrone or brunette in English, and that can cover a wide range of brownish, even auburn hair. So Eric Ives, for those reasons, thinks that this is indeed a portrait of Anne Boleyn. And I'm inclined to think that it is too. I mean, the alternative is of the young Elizabeth and what would otherwise be the old Elizabeth. Now, that is not a very complimentary statement.
No, I can't imagine.
Giver to make.
No, I can't imagine Elizabeth wanting to put herself in the light of, I am an older woman.
Well, exactly. It's a reminder of her age. It's possibly even a reminder that she has no heir. It would be a very insensitive gift. On the other hand, if it is a gift, and we can talk about that in a minute, it would make a lot of sense to show Elizabeth with her mother, because the notion that Elizabeth never talked about her mother, wanted nothing to do with her mother, and that everybody tiptoed round the elephant in the room is again, it's misplaced. There is evidence not just of once when she referred to her mother, but there's also evidence of dedicated books related to her mother being given to Elizabeth. At the pageant that greeted Elizabeth, her mother appears. This is at the pageant that greeted Elizabeth at her coronation. So what we have here are references and people referring to Elizabeth about her mother. So why might not a gift also contain the miniature of Anne? And it demonstrates that Anne is not necessarily the adulteress, the traitor, the whore even, that Henry VIII presented her at, that she can be brought out, as it were, in the light, even if she is rather hidden within a locket.
But that's wonderful to hear about the stories of the pageantry, and I think many people out there who love Anne Boleyn and wonder maybe why Elizabeth hadn't had her mother's body reburied, etc. I think to hear some of those stories will warm the cockles of many people's hearts.
Oh, good. It's good to hear.
This makes it a very personal piece of jewellery, doesn't it? And I think that's what makes it so special and so intriguing. And you've talked about some of the symbolism of what this ring might mean. But is there anything else that makes this ring particularly special?
Well, I suppose the one other thing that we haven't talked about as far as symbolism is concerned relates to the phoenix. Now, I have mentioned the phoenix was a mythical bird, and also that many people took on that phoenix as an emblem. And I mentioned Philip Sidney, but Elizabeth herself did. So one possibility is that the phoenix is actually referring again personally to Elizabeth. The other possibility is that it's associated with the Earl of Hertford, whose surname was Seymour, and the Seymour emblem was a phoenix. Jane Seymour had the emblem of a phoenix. So it could be that it's a reminder of the donor. We just don't know, because the provenance of the ring doesn't give us any hints at all as to who gave the ring or whether even Elizabeth, paid for it herself. I think that, quite frankly, is most unlikely. But nevertheless, we really don't know how it came into being. But you're right. It is. I think it's important because it's a clue that others were not frightened of drawing attention to Anne Boleyn during Elizabeth's reign. And indeed, it's during that reign that these portraits of Anne Boleyn are being commissioned and are appearing in long galleries.
Yes.
So that, I think, is important for us to remember. I think it's also suggestive that Elizabeth did have a sense that this was her mother and she wasn't going to be entirely hidden away. And I think that's why it appeals to us. It has that kind of personal, emotional side to it, which we really can't get close to in the life of Elizabeth.
No, absolutely. But you did mention a little bit about provenance and not really knowing too much about how the ring came into being. But when do we pick up its provenance, if you like? Because it, as I mentioned at the top of this our chat here, it's currently at Chequers, belonging to the property at Chequers, the Prime Minister's home. But what do we know of its provenance? When does it first appear and how?
Well, we don't know at all. We're making many surmises. One of the surmises is that it was in the royal collection when Elizabeth died, and that James I gave it to one of his favourites, not a kind of favourite courtier, but somebody that he was close to in a political sense as well as in a personal sense. There was no homoeroticism, is really what I'm getting at, between him and the recipient of the jewel, who was George Lord Hume, who later became the Earl of Dunbar. And it went through, we do know that it was in the Hume family, or the home family, and we associate it, therefore, with this particular individual. How it got into Chequers, again, we're not entirely sure, but we do know that Arthur Lee, who was the first Viscount Lee of Fareham, who essentially handed over Chequers to the Prime Minister for the nation, he had a huge collection of material goods and portraits and possibly jewels that went right the way back to the 17th century. And it could well be that that's how it was in Chequers. And when Lee passed on, he had no children. So when he and his wife, who was extremely rich, passed on Chequers to the Prime Minister in, I think it was 1917, that the ring was part of the property.
Well, I mean, that's so that we do have, although there are some guesses in there, we do have some sense of how it may have ended up there, which is great. And well,
this is the way. Sorry, I was just going to say, this is the way history of this period just is. It comes together. There's lots of little pieces of a jigsaw, and we can't be certain that we're putting the jigsaw together quite correctly. But if it seems to fit, then we tend to leave it there
That's a
until
nice-
a new piece appears.
Yes, until a new piece displaces it. That's a lovely way of putting it. Well, thank you so much. That has been really interesting to me, and it's also reaffirmed to me, and it's, as I said, I'm really happy to hear you talk about how Elizabeth did embrace the memory of her mother and that she wasn't persona non grata during that period. And I think that's a lovely thing to take away from our chat today. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So that's a big thank you to Sue for sharing her knowledge with us about the Chequers Ring. But fear not, you will be hearing from Sue again in August's programme, because we revisit another conversation I had with her, this time about a very special pair of paintings of Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, which were commissioned around 1575, coinciding with Elizabeth's visit to Kenilworth Castle. And speaking of Kenilworth, we're not done there either. Because when I visited Kenilworth on site, not only did I have a look around the castle and the castle buildings, Gus took me over to see the recreated Elizabethan gardens. And so I'll be concluding my chat with Gus as we explore the gardens themselves, hear about their history, their story, in this very special 10th anniversary year of their recreation. So that's it for the month of July, but don't forget there is a new Facebook group which accompanies this podcast called the Tudor Travel Show Hitting the Road. Just search on Facebook and you should find it. Now, I've created this Facebook group as a place where we can talk about what's discussed in this podcast. You can ask questions, share your thoughts. And perhaps even more importantly than that, I know loads of you have a wealth of experience visiting Tudor places, and I've got loads of top tips to share about where to go, what to see and where to stay. So it's a great place to share all that insider information, or if you're planning a trip, maybe you just want to ask what other people have experienced and what they would recommend. So do head over to Facebook, search for the group and join the party. Well, that really is just it now for the month of July. I will see you again in August, and I will look forward to taking you on some more Tudor adventures. So until then, enjoy the summer and enjoy all those wonderful Tudor places out there which are just waiting to be discovered.